She heard the wall breathe, not the building settling, not pipes or foundations shifting. Breathing, slow and calm, inches away. On the other side of the plaster, someone was standing in the dark, inside her wall, listening to her listen. Then a whisper, "I told you to rest." That's when she called 911 and sat on the floor with a kitchen knife, waiting. I'm Alvin, and this is Common Ground Horror. Her name was Carissa. She was a nurse, night shift, 7 to 7, which matters more than you'd think, because it meant she was gone all night and home during the day, when most people in the building were at work, which meant the building was empty, which meant no one heard anything. No one saw anything. She moved into the apartment on Halsey Street in October, 3rd floor of an old brownstone in Brooklyn, rent-controlled. And if you've ever apartment hunted in Brooklyn, you know what that means. Rent-controlled is like finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. You don't ask questions. You just grab it and walk away fast, which is what she did. October, she moved in. The building was quiet. So quiet. She told people later that she couldn't believe her luck. And that's the thing. She thought the quiet was a feature. She thought she'd gotten lucky. The quiet was the whole problem, and she was grateful for it. The knocking started the second week. 3 knocks. Slow. A pause. 3 more. It's the most ordinary sound in the world, which is exactly what makes it so hard to do anything about it. You can't call the police and say someone knocked on your door. The thing that started all of it was so mundane that telling anyone about it would have made her sound insane. She opened the door. Empty hallway. Flickering light. Peeling wallpaper. Nobody. Here's what you need to understand about these old brownstones. These buildings are over 100 years old. They've been renovated and re-renovated, carved up and recombined. And there are spaces between units that don't appear on any floor plan a tenant would ever see. Service chases, ductwork corridors, gaps behind walls where pipes run from floor to floor. Spaces that were never meant to be lived in, but are absolutely large enough for a person to move through. Most people don't know that. Carissa didn't know that. But someone else did. The notes came next. Yellow legal paper. Neat handwriting. Not frantic, not scrawled. Neat. Which is worse. Because neat means calm. Neat means someone sat down and took their time. Felt comfortable enough to write carefully. The first one said, "You looked tired today. You should rest more." He didn't say, "I'm watching you." He didn't say anything threatening. He said she looked tired. He told her to rest. That's intimacy. That's someone pretending they care about you, which means they're not just observing you, they're relating to you. They've convinced themselves there's a relationship there. And that is the most dangerous kind of person there is. Not the one who wants to hurt you, the one who has decided you belong to them. She called the landlord. He said no one else had a key. She called the police. They took a report. They suggested a camera. They told her to call if anything concrete happened. Concrete? What's more concrete than someone being inside your apartment? But at that point, she couldn't prove anyone had been inside. A note under a door could have come from anyone. She bought the camera. She bought a new deadbolt. She bought a wooden dowel for the window. And for a while, days, maybe a week, nothing happened. And she thought she'd fixed it. The notes started appearing inside the apartment, not under the door, but inside. On her nightstand, on the bathroom mirror, held by a suction cup hook she'd never bought, taped to the inside of the refrigerator door, which means he'd opened her refrigerator, which means he'd been in her kitchen, which means he'd been walking around her home while she was gone, like it was his home too. The chicken was good. You should eat more. He'd eaten her food. I like the blue scrubs better. He'd seen her come home from work. He had a preference about what she wore. You talk in your sleep. He'd been close enough to hear her sleeping. Close enough to hear sounds she made when she was unconscious. Alone. Behind a locked door. In an apartment she thought was hers. The third note was the first time she threw up. Not from fear. From the closeness. From the fact that someone had been near her while she was sleeping, and she hadn't felt it. She said it felt like being touched without waking up. She said she didn't know what was worse, that it had happened, or that her own body hadn't warned her. The camera caught nothing. She had a camera. She checked the footage. The timestamp ran continuously. There were no gaps and no tampering. No one came through her front door. Not once, not ever. But things still moved. A chair pulled out. The thermostat changed. Her pillow on the wrong end of the bed. The shower still damp when she hadn't showered. She started taking photos before she left for work. Every room, comparing them when she got home. Like a scientist. Like evidence. And most nights, everything matched. But on the nights it didn't, the differences were so small. A book turned face down on a page she hadn't reached. The angle of a curtain. That she'd question her own memory before she'd question reality. And that was the point. Not to terrify her, to destabilize her, to make her doubt her own perception. Because a person who doubts themselves doesn't call the police a second time. A person who doubts themselves stays quiet and takes more photos and compares them alone at 3 a.m. and slowly comes apart. The footsteps came from above her ceiling, slow and deliberate, back and forth, pacing. She'd been told the 4th floor was storage. No one should be up there. There hadn't been residents there in years. But she heard someone walking, and the walking was paced, like someone who wanted to be heard. Not the hurried steps of someone trespassing, the measured steps of someone at home. Then, the dragging. Something heavy pulled across the floor, directly above her bed, back and forth, like someone rearranging furniture in the dark, or moving something else. Something you don't want to think about. She called the landlord again. 4th floor is storage. No one up there. No one has access. That night, she heard the footsteps again. And then, a new sound. Tapping. Not on her door. Not on her window. From inside the wall beside her bed. Rhythmic. Patient. Like fingers on a desk. She hammered on the ceiling with a broom handle. The footsteps stopped, then started again, directly above where she was standing. Wherever she moved, the footsteps followed. From above, like he could see her through the floor, which, as it turned out, he could. She found the panel in the closet on a Tuesday. She pushed against the back wall of the hallway closet. She was looking for a leak. There was a damp spot, and she thought a pipe had burst. She pressed the wall, and it gave. Not a door, a panel. Cut flush into the drywall and painted to match. Invisible unless you applied pressure in exactly the right spot, which meant someone had designed it. Someone had built it. Someone had crafted an entrance into her home that she didn't know about. Behind the panel was a narrow passage, ductwork, pipes, and footprints in the dust. Dozens of them going in. And the footprints weren't all the same age. Some were faded, pressed into older dust. Some were fresh. This hadn't happened once. This had been happening repeatedly, over weeks, over months. He'd been coming and going like it was a commute. The passage ran upward through the wall cavity, connecting her apartment to the floor above, to the storage floor, to wherever he lived. She called 911, then she sat on the floor with a kitchen knife and waited. She heard the wall breathe, not the building, not settling pipes or shifting foundations. Breathing, slow and calm, inches away, on the other side of the plaster. Someone standing in the dark inside her wall, listening to her listen. Then a whisper. I told you to rest. The police found the 4th floor the next morning. He'd converted it. A mattress on the floor, a hot plate, water running from a pipe he'd tapped into with a garden hose, and a folding chair, positioned directly over Carissa's bedroom. where someone had drilled a peephole through the floor, through the subfloor, through the plaster, through the ceiling of her bedroom, angled down at her bed. He'd been watching her sleep for months, from a chair, like it was television. They found photographs: Carissa cooking, Carissa in the shower, Carissa reading in bed, Carissa crying on the kitchen floor the night she found the note about her talking in her sleep. He'd photographed her grief. He'd documented her fear as it grew. He'd kept a record of her unraveling, like it was research. They found journals, her schedule, what she ate, what she wore, what she said on the phone, what she murmured in her sleep. He'd been close enough to hear it, and he wrote it down, page after page. Transcriptions of a sleeping woman's private sounds. To know that your unconscious self was not private, that the one place you couldn't guard, your own sleeping mind, was being monitored and cataloged by someone you never saw. They found a name: David Lauer. He'd worked for the landlord years before. Maintenance, which is how he knew about the service corridors, the wall cavities, the storage floor that no one used. He'd kept his key. He'd kept his access. When Carissa moved in, he'd cut the panel in her closet and moved into the space between walls. They never found him. They searched the building. They searched the neighborhood. They issued a warrant. Nothing. He'd been living in those walls long enough to know every exit, every passage, every way out that didn't involve a door anyone would see. He walked into the infrastructure of the city and disappeared. Carissa moved 3 times in the next year. She still sleeps with every light on. She still wedges chairs under door handles. She still checks closets and behind furniture before she goes to bed. She still says she hears breathing sometimes. And she knows it's the building. And she knows she knows. And it doesn't matter. The thing I can't let go of isn't the man in the wall. It's not the notes or the photographs or the peephole. It's what it does to someone to learn that the boundary between alone and not alone was never a wall. It was never a lock. It was never a door. It was just a decision someone else made about you, without your knowledge. And you lived inside that decision for months, thinking you were fine, thinking you were safe, thinking the quiet was a feature and not a warning. Right now, wherever you are, there are spaces in your walls you don't know about. There are gaps behind your closet you haven't pressed on. There are floor plans that don't show everything. And most of the time, that's fine. Most of the time. If you've lived through a nightmare you can't explain, I want to hear it. Send your stories to commongroundhorror@gmail.com to be featured on the channel. This has been Alvin for Common Ground Horror. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.